Yeah, I'm rubbish at this game. I'm rubbish at all games. Yeah, there you go. 3, 4. Oh, I'd be better off just staying still. Oh, there you go. And I give up from being too rubbish. Is now, and welcome to this tutorial on adding a score to our Scratch game. So let's get into it. By the end of this lesson you should know how the if then else block works, and how to add a score variable. So from last lesson, an event is a trigger, a thing that makes something happen or start. A sprite is a character in the game. A costume is the look of the sprite, and the sprite can have many costumes. And saving is downloading the game as a file. So, vocabulary. A variable is something that can change or vary, for example the score. Random is something that happens by chance, for example a random number. Technically computers can't do random numbers, but it does an okay job. And a loop is code that repeats. And so if I'm moving this apple, I want the apple to go down and then go back to the top. So the apple starts off with the apple asks itself the question, am I touching the floor? If so, send me back to the top. Otherwise, move down. And when I get back to the top, put me in a random place. So that's the movement of the apple that we're aiming for. So the first part of it, if I touch the floor, send me back to the top. How do we know if I'm touching the floor? As it's not a separate sprite, it's part of the stage backdrop. Here's a clue, it's green, so it's sensing the colour. Okay, so and then how do we jump back to the top? It's to do with this go to XY in the motion section. And why do we use the forever loop? Otherwise it would move once and then just stop. So we want it to happen for the whole of the game. There it is in all its glory. So when the start button's clicked, forever, if I'm touching green, then move me back to the top, and 150 on the y-axis is the top of the screen. Okay, and let's put that into practice. So go into Scratch, and I'm going to add myself an apple. And the apple's quite large, really quite easy to catch. So I'm going to reduce the size to 50, so 50%. And then I want to go into events. So when the start button's clicked, I want a forever. So forever, and then an if then else. And then so if I'm touching green, so touching is in sensing. So if I'm touching the colour green, so I'm going to click that little sampling box and the on-screen sampler and go for this colour green. This colour green is literally only in the grass. It's not in the trees or anything like that. Otherwise, all sorts of problems would happen. But there's only one green, and that's the ground. So if I'm touching green, I want to go back to the top. So that's in motion, and then go to XY, and the top of the screen is 200. Sorry, 150. Okay, good. Right, so if I press play now, nothing happens. because I'm not touching green. So if I drag this apple down and plonk it on the green, it dumps Y150. It's unusual. So drop that, there you go, drop the top. Let's drop it over here, and it goes back to the top, but in the same position, in the same X position. Right, so back to the presentation. Otherwise, so this is the else. So if I'm not moving, if I'm not going back to the top, I want to be moving down. And how do we move vertically? We've done horizontally, which is the x-axis, so changing x to move the scratch backwards and forwards. But how do we move down? We change the y, so it's a different block. And moving actually down involves a minus number. So just plonking the y in with 10 will send it to the top. So if the apple moves up, you need to change the y value to a minus. And if it moves horizontally, you need to change the block because you're using the x block, the change x block. So in here I shall show you. Let's put the wrong one in first. So motion, if I choose change x by, see how it just races off to the side, or if I change that to a minus, it will go to the other side, but it's doing horizontally, so obviously wrong block. We want change y by, and that will just take it to the top of the screen, so I want that to be a minus number, minus 10, so that will, can you see it's going back to the same place. This x is 33, so this same position. Even if I stop for a sec and drag that off to the side and press play, it will hit the deck, but then it will go back to the same place. Right, onwards with the presentation. Okay, zip through that lot. Right, so I want to be in a random place. So when I go back to the top, I want it to be in a random X position across the screen. So how do we get the position to be random? Going back to the top, we're going to put a random block in there. So in operations, it's a green one. We're going to pick random something to something. Okay, and there it is, the green block. Now it's minus 200 to plus 200, because that's 200 and that's minus 200. It's across the whole of the screen. So back into this one, I want to choose a random, so operations, pick random, and change that to minus 200 and plus 200, which is the full width of the screen, and I'm going to drop that in the X position, and there it is. Can sit and watch it all day. Anyway, back to the presentation. Okay, so now we want to be able to change the score. So the score is, as I said earlier, a variable. So it's a green thing. A green thing? Oh, anyway, we'll have a look. And the score should change when the apple touches scratch. Okay, not the other way around. So the apple knows there's only one scratch, and when it touches the scratch, it's going to change the score. If it was the other way around, scratch wouldn't know how many apples there were. It wouldn't know what was on the stage. And it's just much simpler this way around. So there's the pretty picture. Right, so number one, what is score? it's a variable, so the score can change or vary. And in variables, we're going to make a variable and call it score, as easy as that. So this is a place for the score to be stored in the game, but this place can change. So put this into action. So back in Scratch, I'm going to make a variable. So in variables, well, that wasn't green. I'm going to make a new variable and call it score. Okay, right, and that's ready for the next part. So back to the presentation. So when should the score change? From the apple's point of view, when I touch Scratch. Okay, so we're going to build a new block, and we're going to change the score by 1. So over on this side we're going to change this variable by 1, but we're also going to move the apple back to the top, which I'll show you why we're moving it back to the top, as opposed to just letting it fall through Scratch, which A, looks silly, but also there's another reason. So why use the forever loop? We want it to we want the score to be able to change at any point in the game. So you want to have it looping all the time, and we're only using an if block, so it's not an if then else block, just because there's nothing else to do. I want it just to do this if statement. Okay, so let's build that block. So in Scratch, I'm going to press stop for a sec because that's a bit annoying. In events, I'm going to go for a start and then forever if, so if touching, so in sensing, if I'm touching, and this is where the sprites are, so I'll just drop that in there. I'm going to change that to sprite 1, which is what Scratch is called. Okay, you can check down there that Scratch is called sprite 1. Good. So if I'm touching the sprite 1, which is Scratch, in variables I want to change the score. So change score to, sorry, it's change score by 1. Drop that in there. So if I touch Scratch, change the score by 1, but I also want it to move back to the top. So if I copy this block, duplicate, and just put that under there. Now when I press play, there you go. Oh, does the score change? Difficult to tell. Oh, score isn't changing because I've asked it to change a variable called my variable. So I'm going to change that to score. So change score by 1. Press play. And there you go. I'll just stay where I am. There you go. Plenty. So press stop for now. Right, back to the presentation. So, bearing in mind what I've shown you, I'd like you to do what I've just shown you to do. Build the game with the apple and the scoring and all that good stuff. But then also, I want you to reset the score once the start button's been pressed, because it stays there at the end of each game. I want you to duplicate the apple so there's more than one apple falling from the sky. I want you to make it move at a different speed perhaps, so that it's got a bit of gameplay to it, a bit more exciting. Make it different, so these extra apples, maybe make them bigger, smaller, different colours, and as well as moving at different speeds, maybe give them different scores. So I'll leave you to figure that one out. Okay, So I'll nip back to the game, see how Scratch is progressing with it. And okay, so as you can see, I've come back to the game and score's not reset itself. There is a way around this, but I would like you to try and figure it out for yourselves. So scoring surprisingly highly for my insanely terrible gameplay. Right, as always, have a bit of a look outside, get some sunshine, get some fresh air, come back, build the game, and I shall see you in the next video.